Hey there guys, and it has been a long week. A bunch going on. I did get several projects working, well, not necessarily working in all cases, but progressed at any rate this week, even though I wasn't able to stream. So first thing, and most obviously, we have lights now. Right now I'm just hooked up to my bench power supply here. My intention was to use a 12 volt wall wart, and originally I was just going to pick one of those up from wherever. My uncle gave me this one, which is super hefty and feels like overkill. The funny thing is that it only does 1 amp output, and this is not in use right now for a couple different reasons. One, it puts out 17 volts, not 12, which is a little bit of a problem. And two, I unplugged it after I realized it was doing 17, because even though it's doing 17, I could in theory throw a 12 volt regulator on and we'd be perfectly okay. So I technically could still use it. But I unplugged it and this indicator light on the backside stayed lit for like 5 minutes. So that has me extremely concerned, in between not outputting the rated output that it says and the indicator light for some reason being on way longer than it really should be. I mean, if it's a second or two after it gets unplugged, whatever, there's still energy in the circuit, but like, I mean, I might be exaggerating a little bit on 5 minutes, but that was a scary long time that this was lit up. So I am not using this guy. And like I said, just going off my lab bench power supply. As you can almost see here, let me just pull it up. I went with DuPonts on this thing. One of those things, DuPonts are just plain easy. And the other reason for going with DuPonts, I considered going with JSTs like this guy so that everything was uniform. But when I bought, well, I buy most everything in a multi-pack just because I don't know necessarily when I first buy something what exactly I'm going to be needing. So a multi-pack gives me options, right? So the JST multi-pack, I'd be more or less wiping out my 2 pins in the GST multi-pack, finishing this project. And then I have to buy more, and when I looked online to buy more, I found that it is very difficult to get 2 pins for whatever reason. And by very difficult, I mean very difficult to get them for a decent price. You can definitely get them, you can definitely buy them, but compared to the price of the multi-pack, the 2-pin JSTs. Oh, and also for the other record, I found out the difference between these guys and the other pack I have. The other pack I have are JST PHs, and these are JST XHs. So that's why they don't fit in each other, and that's why I have 2 different kinds. Anyway, regardless, not feasible, not monetarily feasible to do JSTs on this guy like that guy. So we went with DuPonts. DuPonts, I double checked, and it's one of those things. These are LEDs. They're only running, you know, let's say 0.17 milliamps, or not 0.17 milliamps, 0.017 amps, 17 milliamps. That's basically what you can expect out of an LED. So one of those things. I double checked just the rating on DuPonts for the heck of it. Good DuPonts, and these are not good DuPonts, these are Chinese DuPonts. Good DuPonts would be 3 amps. I figure even if these are 1 amp DuPonts, let's say, instead of 3 amps, you know, I'm not going to get anywhere near that for most anything I'd be plugging into the station. So that's my rationale there, using DuPonts. A, they're easy. B, they should handle any load I put on them. And C, the alternatives, the JSTs, just to make everything uniform, were going to be really expensive. So that is why this is set up like this. I've got a, what do you call this, XT60s? I believe that's what this is called, XT60 connector over here. That's the same kind that you find on 3D printers, and I have them because of 3D printers. So since I had them, I figured I may as well use them. I don't know ultimately the most amount of current that's going to be going through this thing. And one of those things right now, I only have some silver wire, or not silver wire, copper wire on the back here, just running the length, and then I solder across. Instead of doing a solder trace all the way down. One of those things, if I do end up with a lot more current going through this thing than I expect, then maybe I beef that up. But one way or another, these are 14 gauge. I think I used 14 gauge wires here. And that will be able to handle like huge amounts of current that I totally unnecessary and won't need. So the power input is completely over spec'd, but everything else should be fine. So that catches up on the lights, which was awesome. Very happy about that guy. The button. So you will see I have multiple buttons here. This is the one you guys knew about. I actually should have checked whether or not I touched base with you guys when I changed the design. If not, basically this is the through shaft. The spring would go in here between this roof and this hole right here. And this hole gets a, I think I have one on the desk right now. Alright, it might be MIA. But it would get a 2.5 millimeter bolt through it. And that would be used to bump these contacts here. So rotate, travel up this ramp, which would compress the spring, bump the contact, and then when you let go, the spring would push it back down the ramp to the center. That's how that worked. Or was supposed to work. Let me get this untangled here really quick. There we go. So I printed this and I looked at it and I said, yeah, you know what? I have absolutely no faith in this shaft. It's got like maybe 2 millimeters on either side of the hole for the screw to keep together and not shear apart, so I don't trust it. So I redesigned and made this a happy face. But as you can see, something happened here. We'll get to that in just a moment. This was a tab, and this tab would travel in this slot. This slot just goes from one to the other. So it just follows this ramp exactly. So that tab would go through the slot and just travel exactly the area of the ramp. One of those things a little bit simpler, and this is a good bit beefier than the screw and the torque on the end of the screw, so we don't have the torque on the end of the screw, etc, etc, etc. We resolved a lot of issues there. Obviously this is broken. I put it together, noticed it was a bit tight, but I had noticed before I had even screwed it onto here that this part was a bit tight, a bit more tight than the other one, so I wasn't that worried about it. I just figured, whatever, it's just a little bit tight. Started testing it out, made it about halfway up the ramp here, and then snapped, which was very disappointing. And there's basically the big problem. There's potentially two problems. One, let me grab this screw right here, or not screw, spring. This is the spring I was using. It doesn't seem that strong to me. Like, it's decent strong. It seems to me enough torque to actually get the job done, is how I went about it. But it's probably a little bit too strong, honestly. It is probably a little bit too strong. So that's part of the problem. The other problem is that, and I'm gonna bring this over to the mic. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. You hear that bumpy, scrapey noise? Yeah. This layer height, the layer height that I have going on here, is actually probably too much. I didn't think it would be too much. I thought it would be smooth enough. But in between this being a bit rough on the end here and the roughness of the layer height as we go up the ramp, basically it's a whole bunch of steps is what it is. So in between going up the steps and the roughness of this point, I think there's just way too much friction in there and it's not working. So this one is a bust. Now, unfortunately, I did not find the time to get the new version printed, so I will just show you in Fusion, and I will get it printed before this afternoon, because this afternoon I plan on playing some more Mustache, because we got this all set up. Again, I rewired this so we can actually do all the buttons on here, which is nice. And I got lights, and in theory we're gonna have a button. So gonna play that Mustache later on, but in the meantime, let's hop over to Fusion, and this is where we're at. So first thing you'll notice is the bottom here is a lot wider than the one I just showed you and the one you've seen before in Fusion. And the reason for that is very simply, it's a pain in the butt to get my fingers and screwdrivers into there to fasten these bolts that hold the microcontrollers in place. So that is why. It's just giving me more room for my fingers. It's a tiny bit extra plastic for a lot of benefit. Now up here, actually, how do I want to show you this? I guess we'll take this apart. We'll take the middle part out. So there's the micro switches, alright. And they will be just against this orange part that I just disappeared. So they're just in there. They're bolted down this time instead of up. Before they were bolted up, this time they're bolted down for reasons. And then, as you can see, if I take the button off and put the orange part back on, and there we go, there are no ramps anymore. And the way this is going to work is, I'm going to throw the button on here. You see these two holes right here? I'm going to throw bolts through those two holes. And if we look at this, you'll see that these bolts, well, right, okay. So this is and is not how I was expecting it. It is a bit closer now that I'm looking at it, the micro switch, but I wanted it closer because as I was playing with these physical versions, back to the camera really quick, as I was playing with these physical versions, I realized I actually don't want to go the full 90 degrees. I actually only want a little bit of turn to go left and right. So I wanted it extra close to the micro switches. I might have overestimated how close I wanted it. Basically, the way I modeled this up, and there's two things here. The way I modeled it up, and it actually, because I haven't printed the bottom part in Fusion, let's hop over to Fusion, because I haven't printed either of these two pieces yet, we can still adjust this. But the way I modeled this up, so that I can say that for the fourth time, yeah, that should be the correct sketch. Nope, that's not the correct sketch. Let's find the correct sketch really quick. There we go. Is I took 30 degrees off the center line. Now, 30 degrees off the center line is technically not correct because you can see the front of the micro switch is in front of the center line. So again, I can actually fix this by moving the micro switches back, you know, let's say half their width just to give me a little bit extra space, or I can leave it as is and see how it feels. Regardless, this is some amount of swing. Again, 30 degrees was what I was shooting for, but we're technically less than that. Left and right, and then it bumps into the micro switches, each of these bolts. So we got bolts moving just a little bit to hit the micro switches, right? And then the trick here, the way we get back center, and I talked about this a little bit in the initial design stream, but this is not exactly the way I talked about it. So I will, yeah, anyway, brain, okay. I'm going to put a bolt through here. Bolt will come up through here. One end of a rubber band will go here, and this center hole will have another bolt. And the other end of the rubber band will go on that center hole, and that will be pre-tensioned. That will be pre-tensioned, and therefore, as this rotates left and right, it will just pull straight back to center. This center hole will pull from, let's say, this point right here, back in line to center because it wants to reduce the length as much as possible. So that's how we're recentering now. I really did like the lifting aspect of the other one where it kind of rode up and down as you turned, and that's why I was trying to make that work instead of just abandoning it after I just gave up on the central shaft idea and printed the other design. But frankly, at this point, I don't think these are the materials to be doing with, at least not the 3D printed materials. So at this point, we are going to abandon ship on that one, and we're just going to go to this much simpler design where I'm using metal for all the pieces that could possibly break, and metal is not going to break. You know, these pins over here are not going to break against the micro switches. This pin right here going to this pin right here is not going to break from the torque of being pulled by the rubber band, so I can be confident that all of this stuff is going to work at this point. And we're going to get it printed, and then we're going to play some video games. So that is all the arcade controller stuff. Give me half a second to turn off my power supply, unplug, and clear off the desk to get to the next part. Attempt to unplug. Attempt being the operative word. There we go. XT60 was a little bit tight. Move the arcade stick out of the way. Don't take my USB hub with me. Alright. Whoops. Try not to destroy everything because this is large. And over to the camera. Okie dokies. So, the router sled. Router sled worked extremely well up until the point that it was not working as well. And then from that point where it wasn't working as well, it worked extremely worse very quickly. So, let's talk about the elephant in the room, that corner. how did I have this set up and why did that corner happen? So I took this, I put this on the router sled, well, underneath the router sled, on the base of the router sled. And sorry, I was just double checking because it occurred to me I didn't double check the music was on, which has been a persistent mistake of mine, but music does appear to be playing. So cool. So I put this on the router base of the router sled, and I used screws. Sorry, I'll do that on camera somewhere. There we go. This corner, you can see this corner. So I did screws just on the sides, not into the board, next to the board, to keep it from moving around. I did all 4 corners, 2 screws on each corner, to keep it from moving around while the router sled was going. Did the first pass, absolutely everything was beautiful, loved my life. Did the second pass, went a little bit deeper this time. Everything still seemed to be alright. Went to do my third pass, which was going to be my final pass. The first pass just got these edges. Actually, I meant to do this. Let me explain to you this one. I have a bowl here to explain my issue. My issue is that this is a little bit warped, like this bowl. Now, it's mostly warped in these 2 directions, not this one, but for demonstration purposes, this is how we're going to do it. So my plan was to cut this part of the bowl like this, and that would obviously still leave a round cup on the bottom. I just flip that over, do that. Yes, we lose some dimensions. We lose some left, right, front, back. We lose, well, actually just left, right, because the front, back, again, was not warped in this direction. So we'll lose a little bit over here in width. Not that big of a deal. Again, it's only warped just so much, so it's not going to be much. And we'll lose a little bit of thickness, getting everything flat. So that was my plan. Cut the edges off here. So you can imagine that going down to this part right here, just taking us all the way down. And then flipping this over and getting rid of the little bit of roundness that we have here by going down. Again, 1/2 inch, well, not again, but as I've said before, 1/2 inch is my 1/2 inch on this board is my maximum. I am plenty fine going thinner. It doesn't really matter to me how much thinner. So that was the plan. Again, have it in place, do 2 passes. The second pass gets me down to this center part right here. I finally have all the raw board, let's call it, taken off, and I'm just going to do 1 more pass to clean it up. As I've traveled down here, and I'm starting from this side and going down, when I get to this corner, I notice things are getting a little bit heavier, which is a little bit weird. I'm getting more chip load, and I'm not quite sure why that is. But I clean up, and I get to the end, then I come back, and I'm like, why am I getting, I come back this way, and I start going down this way, right? And I realize, wait a second, this is getting really heavy. This was really heavy down here, and all of a sudden it's light. Something is clearly wrong. I come back here, I'm noticing that this is off. Do another pass. Holy crap, what the heck is going on? I check, and this corner right here, I don't know if you can see this on camera, this corner was sticking up a bit. Evidently, when I threw the screws in this side, this side was actually pushing in on the board. Again, all it was supposed to do was stop it from moving. I wasn't trying to bolt the board down. I wanted the board to stay cupped up like this. I didn't want to force it flat, because when I got done routing, if it was forced flat, it would just spring back up into a cup shape. Evidently, I had too much pressure over on this side, and that side ended up actually having too much pressure too. So that side rattled loose off of the screw that was holding it. And therefore this whole entire thing, overcompensated because the screw on this side was holding it extra down. So if I hold this bowl right here, if I have equal amount both sides, then it just flattens out, right? But the second this side let goes, this side pops up. So that's what happened. So I'm sitting there, and you'll see I actually took another pass right here. I started to take another pass because I'm like, screw it, we're just going to fix this. And then I realized that I was basically out of router length as I'm going along here. I'm basically one of those things again. I was noticing that this side was not as bad as that side in terms of warping. So I felt the chip load getting down, and I knew I was getting basically out of depth on the router. Surprisingly, again, when I talked to you last time about the router sled, I wasn't sure that it'd be that much issue. I figured, we got plenty. I'm just overcomplicating things. Turns out I needed more. So I stopped at this point. Again, I had this much that I needed to clean up, and then I started to clean up down here, just gonna, take everything flat, etc. Said, all right, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna flip this over. This will just be the bottom. Nobody will see this, and I'll just do it right on the top side. We'll just get the top side absolutely perfect. And I flipped it over. Now, in the thumbnail, you might have noticed this guy. What is this guy? Now, I just told you that you'll also probably notice that this side is not done at all. This side is still... Actually, no, I did get one pass on this guy. I take it back. I got one pass on this guy. It was not nearly... it was not a very good pass. It did not hit everything. Obviously, this is not completely flat, right? So there's areas where it did not actually touch, especially over in this corner. So the areas I didn't get over in this corner that I need to lower more. The problem is, again, I am out of router depth. So I say, all right, you know what? I didn't want to have hardly any stick out on this bit. I wanted this bit as solid in there as possible. I'm going to take all the stick out I can possibly get in order to do this backside. I did the one pass. And then I lowered it to do the second pass, and as I'm coming in on this corner, I feel stuff start getting really heavy. And I get up to here, I get up to right here, and I go, crap, something is really wrong. It really should not be this heavy. I did not lower the bit that far. So I'm backing out, I back out, and then I come back in because in theory, I shouldn't feel anything when I come back in, right? Because we already milled this part. I come back in, and all of a sudden it gets super duper heavy, and things are not feeling very good. And as it turns out, that bit, I took it so close to the edge that it actually slipped out. Again, one of these things, when I tightened it down, I super duper tightened it down as hard as I can, just because I knew I didn't have much meat there, but evidently that was not nearly enough. And this happened. The bit slipped the rest of the way out. One of those things that was just barely hanging on to the very edge of the collet and working its way through here, and I got this far before I decided, okay, this is definitely bad. And I started backing up. That's what this part is here. I started backing up, trying to get the heck out, and the bit just started going crazy, and that's what all this random chip out is right here. So yeah, that was a bad decision on my part. I should have made other changes instead of dropping the router bit out. That was stupid on my part, and I knew there was some potential there, but I ignored it, and now the board looks like this. Now, unfortunately, I did not have time to complete this, but back to my plan was to do epoxy tables, epoxy boards like this, exactly this size. I got that thing built, covered it in tuck tape because I'm going to reuse it a few times, and one of the things I've heard people say, you're better off with melamine, tuck tape, etc., etc., etc. That's at least an opinion I've gotten. And the caveat was, unless you're going to reuse them multiple times, then it might make sense to use tuck tape and mold release, etc. So that's what I'm going with. I built the mold, got it tuck taped, went to put this board in, and well, my mold was square when I started. I did it in a few different steps. I set it up square. Physically, without the screws going into it. I just set the boards in place, made sure the boards were square, got my area, put the boards, tuck taped everything, then put the boards back on, and somehow when I put the boards back on, everything, these two sides, these short sides, went out of line. The short sides went crooked, and now the mold is crooked. Now, I did not realize that, unfortunately, until I went to put this board in there, which was after I hot glued all the corners to make sure that no epoxy was going to leak out. And I hot glued both inside and outside. So, I have not actually, obviously, gotten this epoxy jet because it's going to take me some effort to get all that cleaned up, get that apart, cleaned up, and then re-square everything up. And I just plain haven't had the time. So that's what's going to be happening with this guy. I'm going to fix the mold, get it actually square on these sides. These sides are actually completely parallel, like perfectly parallel, these sides. Somehow these shorter sides, the width, whatever reason, that did not end up square. This actually, I marked it. This is how much I'm off right here. If you can see that, it's about a 1/4 inch, maybe even 1/3 of an inch at the top there, down to this corner. So that's how much I'm out, which is pretty bad. But unfortunately, that has to be fixed, and because I didn't check it before I went and put all the hot glue on there, that's going to be a good bit of effort. So once I get that done, this will get epoxied just to make up for the fact that I completely destroyed everything, and it will just be an epoxy board just like all the other ones, and then I'll clean it up and we'll finally get to using it. I'd prefer to have this, available right now to mount the arcade stick on, because the arcade stick is a little bit with all the cables hanging out. I'd much prefer to have a flat bottom so that the cables don't get caught in or anything, but that's not the world we live in, so no big deal. That's just what we gotta cope with. So anyway, that is an update on all the projects. Again, sometime this week, well, hopefully sometime this weekend, but if not sometime this weekend, sometime this week, I will get time to get this epoxied. And then one of those things, if I do that, let's say Monday at the latest, hopefully, then let's say by Wednesday, Thursday, it will be completely done. I'll have it sanded down, flat, etc., finished, and we will be off to the races. So that is the plan. Otherwise, the plan for the rest of the day, like I said, MuseDash later on, assuming that nothing goes wrong with this button over here that or the controller that I'm making. Actually, even if something goes wrong, I might still play MuseDash anyway. Otherwise, we also have the light stream, designing the light mounts so that this, I don't have as much issue with the shadows as I have right now, and everything is a little bit easier to see. So we got that design stream, and then again, as I keep on saying, some pixel art so that I don't have to keep on just banishing you to the Fusion realm every single time I want to move stuff around and not be distracting on camera, or when I want to transition between other stuff, on the computer screen, when I switch pictures and whatnot. So anyway, some pixel art on the transition screens would be nice. So those are the plans for this weekend, at least so far. So that would be 3 streams, MuseDash this afternoon probably, pixel art stream at some point, and the camera mounts so that it's not so dark over here. So anyway, hi Wrath. Thanks for coming in. I'm actually just getting ready to sign off here, but thanks for showing up. And anyway, yeah, those are the streams planned for this weekend, and I hope everybody shows up. As always, I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world, and I will catch you next time.